Okay, so we all know this lady, right? Sometimes she's in pajamas, sometimes she's in mail form, almost always holding a big bundle of cash. She's that temptress that appears in the right side banner of the websites where you're illegally downloading music or movies or TV shows. I've wanted to be her, you've wanted to be her, and in November of 2012 I decided I was going to be her. Oh, it's not necessary. Thank you. As you were walking away, I realized that I don't actually want that, but I'm glad you have it. So rewinding back a little bit, 2008, I got my first staff job at a magazine of writing for Avenue here. Avenue was probably the biggest thing to happen in my career. Before that, I was freelancing, but I wanted out. And I wanted out because in my best month, I made maybe $400. So this magazine taught me everything I know about magazine writing, about professionalism. And as I stayed there, 4.5 years on, I got better, and the opportunities for me also got better as a writer. But they weren't always something that could fit with this magazine. So I started to get literary journalism, personal essay opportunities with 18 Bridges and the Globe and Mail, and there was a magazine in Hong Kong that wanted me to do travel writing for them. Writing where I travel for free, dine for free, stay at free hotels, and then get paid to do it. I mean, it's insane. But it got to the point where I couldn't do both. There was only so much energy in me creatively and physically, even at 26. And so I decided that I would finally heed the call of that apparition on those shady websites. I'm not alone. I'm part of a trend. And just show of hands, who are the full-time freelancers here? Okay, there's a few part-time freelancers. Okay. Some of you are. It's a growing trend in I couldn't find Canadian stats, but in the United States by 2020, 40% of the adult population will be contingent workers. So that is freelancers, temp workers, or contract workers. The old way of thinking was that you worked hard, you paid your dues, and then you got tenure at a company which came with a pension and security, which sounds great, except that the corporate world can be constraining. Now the dream, I think, for our generation is that you start your own company, and it's often a company of one. And you subcontract or you work with a variety of people or clients, but on your own terms. The reason that this is happening, I mean, there are many reasons. Corporations are downsizing their staff for space or freeing themselves of expensive health benefits. Cloud and mobile technology allows this, and also as we move from a manufacturing economy, to a knowledge economy and creative economy, this starts to allow this kind of shift. But I think most of all why this is happening is because freedom is power. It's the power to make your own hours, to take on as much work as you want, or to work from anywhere, anytime, to be your own boss, to run a cycle of laundry while you listen to podcasts, while working on your own projects. When I left in 2012, I wasn't sure if I could make it as a freelancer. I mean, it wasn't great timing. I'm sure you guys have heard a thing or two about the journalism and the state of the industry. But on top of that, my wife was returning to university, and I would have to support the both of us. And I couldn't do that on my previous salary either, but it seemed even more doubtful on a freelancer's earnings. But I thought I'd try it out now while I can. I come to bring you good news and bad news. The good news is that it can be done. There seemed to be no lack of work. The pay has been excellent working as a freelancer. But the bad news is this. It's not easy. It's not easy. despite all those romantic notions, you do have to be super self-motivated and disciplined. And if you're not, you might fail. Because no one's going to push you to work harder or even get up in the morning and work at all. There's no one stopping you from being on BuzzFeed. There's no one stopping you from cleaning your floors or just laying down on your rug and teasing your cats with a tassel for way too long. And what this does, of course, is that it stretches like 2 hours of work into 5 hours, 8 hours of work into a full day. And then there's this, too. This is probably the most misunderstood thing about freedom, I think, that you get to make your own hours and work on your own accord. If you're actually making ends meet, you don't. And it's because meeting and speaking with clients and the people that you're going to work with is really on their terms. And I'm afraid that still mostly falls in the 9 to 5 slot. And the other thing, too, is that freedom can be very, very lonely. What I noticed working from home and what I noticed in the first month of it is that I would get cabin fever from working from home all day. Now the plus side is that when you're your own boss, you could just take a break to go for a run or go for a bike ride or meet someone for coffee. But after a while of doing this, all those former colleagues who used to quit working hard or hardly working, that stuff, that was suddenly kind of desirable. All that forced water cooler talk, all those office birthday parties where you suddenly forget that there was a vegan person and then you have to apologize because you didn't bring something for them. That actually seemed kind of nice on certain days. But more than anything, I think I just missed collaborating with people. Having people to go back and forth on, run things by them, that's incredibly valuable. And that's also why I work here at Startup Edmonton. I have a membership here, or at least it's one of the many reasons why I decided to work here. Another one is this. Freedom can be relentless. I think any self-employed person will tell you that it's hard to check out mentally or physically. It can be, for sure. There's times when you'll be at a dinner party with, I'll be at a dinner party with my wife and some friends, and I should be enjoying myself. I should be present like they are. But instead, I'm thinking deadline after deadline after deadline. I'm thinking project after project after project. My mental space is in my work. And now, at least by working at Startup Edmonton, I can sort of kind of compartmentalize it, get in here at a certain hour, leave at a certain hour, and do my best to leave it here. Doesn't always work, but I try. I couldn't be happier with my clients. I really couldn't be. I get to do a variety of stories that I love. I get to do talks like this. I get to do lots of travel writing. I have the whole media world theoretically at my fingertips. There's no glass ceiling for me except for the hours in my day. But this can be a trap. Are you all familiar with the cult of busy? Yeah. The cult of busy, most of us are card-carrying members of this cult. When someone asks you, how are you doing? And you say, oh, busy. Busy, man. Real busy. That's the cult of busy. And it's obnoxious for a host of reasons, but I think we're all guilty of it. It's just, it's the new small talk now. It's just how busy you are. And it becomes even more incessant when you're self-employed and when you're a freelancer. Working 12 hours a day is average for me, and working till midnight with a couple breaks in between, that's totally normal. And that's partly because of my tendency, the human tendency to procrastinate when no one's looking over your shoulder. But it's also because I'm still learning to say no. And learning to say no is one of the most important things for a freelancer. And it's a scary word for a freelancer, too, even to work you don't want to do. I may have a full plate for April and May, up to 3 deadlines a week, perhaps, plus a host of interviews and engagements and whatnot. But if I'm not carving out time to pitch stories at the same time, that might mean that I have no work for June, right? So I always have to have one foot in the future as well. Now, as it so happens, my wife and I are spending June and July traveling. And that's something that I could never have done before when I was on someone's payroll. But it took a lot of no's to carve out that time, a hell of a lot of no's to do that. And it also means that I'll have to research and propose new stories, try to find new work on my vacation time in July. Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm going to come back and we're just going to be two broke-ass Canadians with a bunch of miniature Eiffel Towers. And I'm going to be back to where I was when I started as a freelancer. So all that doom and gloom reminded me of this little phrase. Slight exaggeration, of course. But it can be. It really can be. All that stuff about work-life balance that blossoms from self-employment, that is not inherent. It's something that is learned. And here's how I've been learning that. The first thing has been to find a routine. So for me, I work 9 to 6 on the best of days. I mean, I try really hard to keep it within those hours. I don't always succeed, but I try to keep that routine. I try to promise myself one day off a week. That's Saturdays for me. That's no email, no nothing, just so I can be present in the day, with my wife or friends or my cats or books or whatever. I try to get out of the house as much as possible. Try not to do work there unless it's the most convenient place to do it. But now that might be a cafe or it might be Startup Edmonton. I'd really encourage you, if you are a freelancer, if you are going to freelance, to invest in a desk space or an office space somewhere, such as Unit B, such as Startup Edmonton. I think there's a couple more out there. The cost of that desk space or office space will pay itself off because you'll be far more productive. And you'll also meet other people whom you'll work with. Befriend your competitors, the other freelancers within your trade, your counterparts. I hang out with a lot of freelancers, and we share tips, we gripe, we help each other out. Sometimes they will look at a draft of my story before I file it, which would probably upset a lot of my editors. But when I worked at a magazine, you were able to do that. You're able to run something by someone before you hand it in. Sometimes they critique a pitch of mine before I send it. I do the same thing for them. If we get jerked around by the same client, there's we can kind of take a stand together. It's kind of funny. All this advice, I realize, is basically just trying to recreate the experience of being in an office and being on staff, right? But the major difference, of course, is that you're accountable to yourself. The other thing is, don't just make friends with counterparts, because then you can become kind of insufferable in your complaining about your business and whatnot. So make friends with others, so you don't become, again, insufferable or addicted to your work, but also because outside perspectives can be very illuminating. Part of freedom is the freedom to think creatively, which comes from outside perspectives. And that's another great thing about working in a space like this as well. This is starting to turn into a promotion, but being able to have run-ins with people from a tech background or people from a graphic design background, they help me see things differently and learn new things that I wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. The other thing is, we went over learn to say no, but reward yourself. If you do late hours, reward yourself by maybe sleeping in the next day, but you don't want to get too much into that habit. Take trips if you can afford it, or just take your work with you. A friend of mine who's here today is a part-time freelancer and works on staff, but sometimes she takes her work with her to Amsterdam for a week. And that's the beauty of the global economy and mobile technology, and if you can afford to take advantage of it that way, you should. Find a couple of stable gigs. For me, that's teaching 1 day a week, and I have a column in Metro. As you could probably guess, as a freelancer, your checks arrive basically when your clients get around to cutting that check for you, which isn't always when you've invoiced them. So I may see $5,000 in a month. I may see $100 in a month. It just depends on that. So to have a stable income, such as teaching, such as the column, that arrives the same week every month, that allows me to just kind of live a somewhat normal financial life. And then I tell this to all my students, and when I go to McEwen and talk to their journalism students and writing students, don't jump into freelancing. If you're at the beginning of your career, it's not worth it. It's like jumping into the ocean without floaties. Work for a company, establish your network and your reputation. What happened for me at Avenue after being there for 4.5 years, all these writers that I had worked with, that I had edited, they became editors themselves, and then they would throw me work. They were helping me out because I'd helped them out as writers. And finally, just remember that, as Brandon was kind of saying, freedom it's a state of mind. You may not actually want it. You may think you do, and then you try it out, and it's just not for you. You need that structured life. You need a reason to put on pants in the morning. You need a reason to wear shoes in the morning, to get out of the house in the morning. Not everyone is disciplined, and that's where becoming someone's employee is a beautiful thing. You may want this, but not in the long term. You may want some of it and need a part-time gig for mental and financial stability. You won't know it until you try it, so I would encourage everyone at some point to give freelancing a try if you can. Even for a year, you will learn a lot about your capacity and your capabilities, your creative capabilities. For me personally, right now, it's been the best thing I've done for my career, even though I bemoan it sometimes. And it's not exactly what I thought it would be. It's been the best decision I've made. But that's for me right now, and I have no idea if this is going to be desirable for me in a year from now, in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now. And that's part of what comes with freedom, is the freedom to decide when you want it and when you don't. Because I have no idea how long it will be until this temptress is the one I desire. That is the end of my presentation. So I guess we do questions now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear it. Cool. Mm-hmm.
Did you notice your work change tangibly when you moved to be a full-time freelancer?
The kind of work I took on?
Not the way you wrote, the way you approached it.
Yeah, I think so. I try not to juggle too many things at once. What I find is that I will carve out a few days for one project and try to cut everything else out on those days. So that's something that I didn't have the privilege or foresight to do when I was on staff, because you just kind of, it's a bit of a whack-a-mole thing, right? Whatever lands on your desk or lands in your email, you're taking care of it. So being freelance, what that's ultimately allowed me to do is write longer form stories. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 word stories, like 10 pages, 11 pages or so. That's not something that I was really able to do because I just didn't have the time or energy to do something like that before. So that's been a great thing that's come out of freelancing. And that's the kind of work that gets you recognized as a writer as well as the long form stories. Yeah. Yes?
So when you started freelancing, and then you got the EPL gig.
Oh yeah.
Looking back on it now, do you think that it came at a good time, at a bad time? Like, how did that affect your freelancing?
Yeah.
And looking back on it now, do you feel like it was better or?
No, it was a great opportunity. So I was the writer in residence at the Edmonton Public Library last year, and that came 2 months after I'd gone freelance. And I didn't expect to get that job. Didn't think so. So it was quite a surprise when I'd just left Avenue to work for myself, and then got this writer-in-residence gig. I mean, I was thinking that the writer-in-residence gig, if I got it, would be great because I'd have that stable income that I was talking about, and then I can just make a pittance as a freelancer and survive a little bit. But what I found was that there was an incredible amount of freelance work out there. So to have those two things converge at once was tough and scary, and if I could, rewrite my past, I would do the writer-in-residence gig maybe at a future date. But I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that,
kind of.
Yeah.
But do you think that it's helped you this year?
Oh,
that last year, like
yeah.
doors that have opened and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, the writer-in-residency gave me a profile that I had not enjoyed before. And so I started to get work that I normally wouldn't, like public speaking work and that kind of stuff, and mentoring work and teaching work. Yeah. Yes?
Yes, Omar, do you have like a mentor or somebody that you can hold yourself accountable, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have, I've created a bit of a posse of freelancers that we mentor each other. We look over each other's work sometimes, or pitches or whatever, and help each other out. I've had many mentors in my life, but they're not the kind of people that are always there for me. I would say that Curtis Gillespie, the editor of 18 Bridges, has been, he probably turned red hearing this, but he's been a huge mentor for me because he was, a few years ago, the person who taught me how to write long-form literary nonfiction, how to write personally. But as for like a mentor figure that I meet with once a week or every couple of weeks, no, it's just other freelance friends that I drink with, and then we talk about our stories together, and we bounce ideas off of each other, and yeah, we just kind of create our own little union. Yeah?
You have also talked about, balance between work and fun and family, and because I see that you're still kind of having a hard time.
Yeah, well, I'm just figuring out what my pace is, too, and that could take, at this point, I've been freelancing for 17 months. You do count the months when you're freelancing. And I pretty much have my pace now, but I still have a little bit to learn. And a lot of it has to do with what I said, with learning to say no. But I'm getting an idea of what my capacity is in a week, in a day, so that I don't take on way more than I can actually handle. Because of course what happens there is when you take on too much work, your work suffers for that. It becomes not as good as it could be, as it should be.
And your personal life too.
Yeah. I'm lucky to have a wife in school, so we can be in the cult of busy together. All right. But when she's out of school, it is a bit of imbalance in our lives, right? Yes, Aaron.
Hey. Your writing process, it doesn't sound like it's changed, but I just wanted to ask you, so your writing process has changed at all?
Has my writing process changed?
Yeah.
I since going freelance, yeah. I've learned that writing during the weekdays, when people are alive and awake and are emailing you and calling you, doesn't work out that well. So I might save my smaller stories for the weekdays, where I can get just like a couple of hours to do them. But when I need a good 2 8-hour stretches to write something that's long form, I'll leave it for the weekend. I'll write on Sunday. Sometimes I'll write on Saturday and Sunday, and then take Monday and Tuesday off in lieu of that. But it is important to be able to be present in your work and concentrate on your work. And so, that's what I've had to do. Or what I'll do is sometimes take the day off and then work in the evening when the world's kind of shut down. Yeah. That way I'm just able to immerse myself in my writing a little bit more. But, this whole idea of being a writer and writing all the time is just not true. Writing makes up maybe 15% of my time. The rest of it is researching, interviewing, emailing, invoicing, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
How do you keep from feeling or sounding smarmy and self-promotional with everybody?
You don't. You just accept that's part of it.
Right.
Well, I mean, this sounds so gross, but you're your own brand, right? You're your own brand, your own company. It is, right? And if I had the privilege of being this like faceless company, then I would just be able to buy an ad with my logo on it and then walk away from it and be like, oh, that's a company. But when your face and your name are your company, I mean, you do have to be a little bit self-promotional.
It might just be me, but I just see the look on some people's faces like, oh God, there comes that guy walking down the street. And then they switch.
They cross the street.
Yeah. You haven't had that.
I probably have.
Okay, well, it's probably just me. So it's not really a question, I guess.
It's a confession. I don't know. I was doing a talk for NASH, the students' journalism conference, and this young woman in the audience tepidly asked, how much time do you spend on your personal brand? And I was one of 3 people on the panel, and 2 of them were just like, ew, personal brand, gross. And I was like, well, hold on. Like, yeah, it's an icky word. Like, I hate the word personal brand, but it's the word that we have to describe this thing of using the internet to promote yourself and find other work and clients. And until we have a better word than that, that's the word we're going to use. And in terms of how much time I spend on my personal brand, I'd say it's constant. All right. I mean, it's like every time I tweet, it's every time I'm meeting people in a professional setting or in a networking setting. I mean, this is part of it as well. So it is constant. And also, it's important to be able to turn that off when you're with people you love. Yes, all right.
What's the breadth of work that you take on as a professional writer? That means you mentioned like a travel story, but it seems like that was very much at that time. Is there stuff you won't take on?
When I started freelancing, I took on everything. I did some web copy. I did a little bit of copywriting. And that was mainly just because I didn't know if I could make it as a freelancer, so I just wanted to take on everything I could. I've since stepped away from copywriting and content creating, just because I've been lucky enough to find enough work in freelance journalism, in creative writing, and in the teaching gig that I have as well. Yeah. In respect to the kind of magazine writing that I do, I'm a generalist. So I'll write about food one day, and then I'll write a profile of Stephen Mandel the other day, and then I'll run off to Mexico to do a review of a resort or something like that. And then I'll come back and write an educational piece for the U of A Alumni magazine. So as a generalist, I just take on what I can, or what interests me and what I can as well. Yeah. Yes, Sarah.
Do you find that you have more time for extracurricular type things, and how do you
No.
do that?
Next question. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Your alter ego.
Oh, my rapper thing. No, the rapper thing's that's one thing that I've had to really put on the back burner. So as a hobby, I'm a musician, I'm a rapper, and I haven't been able to do that for 17 months. One thing that I'm glad you brought this up. Actually, I wouldn't have thought to bring it up. I don't know who here also has other artistic hobbies, personal hobbies that you do by going full Monty freelance? No. Full throttle freelancing. Whoa! Full throttle freelancing. It's sucked up so much of my creative energy that I have none left for the music. And I've not written a song, I've not recorded a song in a very, very long time. I don't mind it. I don't care. It's always just been a little bit of a hobby, and maybe I'll come back to it in the future. But no, I haven't really had time for that. Yeah. But I mean, I could just say no to more work and then make time for that sort of thing. But to me, right now, music is less important than this. I mean, I love my job, right? And I want to do as much of it as I can without going crazy. So that's a decision I've made. Yeah, Carmen.
As for someone like me who doesn't feel that writing is a strong suit of myself, what I guess words of advice would you have for someone who wants to become not a journalist, but just a better writer?
Oh, start a blog. Start a blog about something you're passionate about, even if it's like peas or whatever, and just write about peas. And just get into the routine of writing and write for an audience, because if you're just writing for yourself, you don't get better. You need people to like say, that was great or that sucked, so that you know what works and what doesn't. So yeah, write for someone. Yeah.
Last question. Or two.
Okay, where are they coming from? Okay, over here.
What was the tipping point for you when you started to say no to people and stop saying yes to everyone?
When I started to be able to say no to people.
Sorry, just to clarify,
sure.
like, because in a similar scenario when we were freelancing, you say no to pretty much no one. Like, you work all the time, you take on everything.
Mostly.
So more so when you were more comfortable saying no, not when you just kind of started, but you felt like, okay, I can say no to these people and keep going.
Yeah, I think when it got to the point where I was now able to really write the stuff that I love, and I wasn't just a mercenary anymore. I mean, I'm still a bit of a mercenary, but I realized that that doesn't have to be 80% of my work. It can now be 25% of my work. It just means that I have to pitch a lot. I have to pitch the stories I want to write. And so by finding time to propose stories that I want to write and getting those jobs, I'm able to then say no to the kind of stuff that would normally make up at that time. Does that make sense? And Laura Lynn.
That was probably that question for the last question. I've never met another writer that had quite as robust of a system and process in place. Like, could you talk just a little bit, I think it would be valuable for other people, about the systems that you have in place in your spreadsheet systems and your planning process?
Sure. I keep a spreadsheet of all my pitches. I'll try to describe it to you. It'd be like all my stories over here, and then first pick, second pick, third pick, fourth pick, fifth pick, sixth, seventh, eighth to ninth. And I'll just have each magazine that I want to pitch it to. And I'll write up a proposal and send it to pick number one. And then after 2 weeks, do a follow-up. And if they reject it, then all that pessimism of being rejected, I immediately turn into optimism and hope by tweaking that pitch and then sending it to number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And what I found is that if you write a good proposal, someone out there will want it. And so I'm kind of I'm very methodical that way, I guess. So that's one thing that I do to stay on top of my pitches and make sure that they always find a home. And what I found is probably about 75% of my pitches are eventually accepted. Maybe not the first time, but maybe the third or fourth or fifth time. As for other routines, like I try to do all my interviews in one day as much as possible. Or maybe I'll just do 2 days of interviews. That way I'm not cutting up my work so much and I can just carve out a whole day for one project that way. I have learned to outsource transcribing to people in Dubai or the Philippines or the United States using Odesk.com. Odesk, Fiverr, I think there's a couple of others. They're subcontracting websites. And so for $11 an hour, $12 an hour, I have someone overseas transcribe my work. And that way, I mean, a 1 hour interview is about 4 hours of transcribing, and that's time I would rather spend doing something else, even finding more work, right? 4 hours transcribing, I could probably put together 2 pitches in that time and land 2 assignments worth a few grand. So you start to get an idea of what your time is worth, right? And then you start to make decisions about whether you should be spending it doing so-and-so or so-and-so. You don't want to get to the point where sometimes I am, where it's like cleaning the floor. Well, let's see, cleaning the bathroom, let's say. It's like, oh, well, I could be making money in that time. No, you still want to clean your bathroom.